Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on money stories from your favorite activists and allies, artists and tech gurus, and trailblazing leaders in the LGBTQ+ community. We are David
and John Auten-Schneider,
your financial coaches and hosts.
Having experienced firsthand what it's like coming back from debt, we want to help you avoid our mistakes to build the life that you want.
So we all can live just a little bit more fabulously.
And now for the show.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously. Today's guest is Michael Kaye. Michael is the Director of Brand Marketing and Communications at OkCupid, where he leads global PR and marketing efforts focusing on inclusive storytelling and social impact.
Michael has been recognized as one of Business Insider's top public relations pros in tech and Provoke Media Innovator 25. Michael also teaches public relations at New York University and holds degrees in communication and strategic communication. And the first part of our interview with Michael kind of reminds me of my story of when I first graduated college. My first job was as an EKG tech. And I think I only got paid about $17,000 a year for that job.
Yeah.
And I was so frustrated that after all that time going through college that I couldn't earn enough money to move out on my own, pay my own rent and all my other bills. So it kind of got frustrated pretty quickly, and I bounced down to Philadelphia pretty fast for a job in retail for, dare I say, Abercrombie & Fitch.
You kept doing that bouncing around thing, and that's what eventually landed you that job in finance. Mm-hmm. And had it not been for that job, we wouldn't have gone on our first date.
And that is a topic for another episode.
So let's dive into the first portion of Michael's interview, where he shares 3 steps that helped him 5x his salary in a short time period.
Welcome to the Living Not So Fabulously podcast. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been waiting for this all week.
Of course. That's awesome. So we brought you on the show because the last couple of studies that we've done with the Motley Fool, one of the biggest concerns that's come back from the LGBTQ+ community is their concern with keeping up with the cost of living. And we're kind of coming out of this high inflationary environment. And wages have been relatively stagnant for the masses since about the 50s. So you've somewhat successfully navigated your career to increase your annual salary, but you started out in a communications role at $40,000 a year. Is that correct?
Less than that.
Less than that.
And could not even afford my train ticket.
Oh,
to
wow.
the job.
Wow.
So can you, for our listeners and viewers, can you explain what does that look like when you're living and working in a place like New York City?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up outside New York City, and that's where I was living when I started my career post-graduation. So this is about a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And I worked at different communications firms. And really early on, I had heard from people who are a little bit more senior than me that if you were to leave to go to a different firm, for a promotion, you would likely make more money than you were if you were promoted at said agency. Mm-hmm. And that's really the approach I took. So when I first started my first full-time role, I was making $38,000.
You said 30,000 or 38?
38,000.
38, okay.
And it was semi-livable because I was not living in New York City. Mm-hmm. I had that option to commute in. Mm-hmm. So rent and cost of living was a little bit lower. Okay. I think it does balance out when you're paying for the commute.
Yes.
But after hearing that piece of advice, I really took it seriously, and I wound up moving agencies every time I would have been up for a promotion. And that allowed me in 5 years, or a little bit less than 5 years, to go from $38,000 to $50,000 to $67,500. Is that an incredibly high wage? No, but the leap from $38,000 to $67,000 made my life a lot easier. And after that point, I had moved in-house or brand side to Match Group, where I was always going to be making more money than had I still been at an agency.
Mm-hmm. So to put that into context, for most people, when they're in a company long enough, they're typically looking at a 2 to, if they're lucky, a 4% annual increase. But your strategy was every time you were up for promotion, let's see what company I can move to get a much more significant increase. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that that's the case with most, industries probably?
Yeah, so my guess would be, I think, a few reasons. One, I would say sometimes it's a little bit less expensive for the employer, and they think that they can actually get away with giving you a small increase because how many people want to go through the hassle of finding a new job? Not many. And I think employers know that and they act on that because I consider looking for a job a part-time job in itself. Yeah. There's a lot of research you have to do. There's a lot of time dedicated to the application process. And then if you're lucky enough to get to the interview phase, there's a lot of like research and prep that you have to do for all these interviews. There are some companies that friends of mine have worked at where I've heard of days on end of interviews that you have to block out whole days. So it is a lot of work. And I think employers know not everyone is willing to put in that much work to find a new job quickly. So I think that's one reason. I think another reason you can get more money by going to another company is sometimes it's more attractive to bring in someone versus hiring within. I think it's attractive when you're getting a fresh perspective on something. Right. I've worked in the dating app space for over 5 years, and I am so excited when I get the opportunity to talk to someone who does not work in my industry because they're coming at it with a completely different lens than all of us who have been in this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
I think one of the questions we were kind of ruminating on before the interview here was this idea of, does it almost seem like employers care more about new individuals coming into the company than they do about the existing ones, which I think it kind of lends yourself to the comment you just made about a fresh perspective, or we need a new voice, or we need some non-yes men on the team to make things maybe balance out, or just like you said, a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that I think, this is just my thought, I think I got my job at OkCupid because during my interview with the CEO, it's supposed to be a half-hour conversation. We wound up talking for over an hour, and he threw all these ideas at me, and I said no, no, no to all of them, and why? And it goes back to your point that we don't want to surround ourselves with yes men. Yeah. But I also think it's really dependent on the type of, or the company that you're working at. I've definitely worked at companies where, to be quite honest, I'm just a number. Yeah. That's how they see me. And I also recognize that. And that's okay in the moment. And then there's companies where I feel like I'm being invested in. They really want to see me grow and excel within this space. And they're giving me all the tools to do so. And I think that's when you see people stay at a company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Do you think when you look back on what you've done, do you think that there are some actionable tips that you could share with the listeners or the viewers that you kind of acted on to help you get up the courage to say, okay, I am going to move to another company. I am going to take the time to invest. I am going to update my resume. I am going to do what it takes these days to get that resume read by AI and all, them eventually passed on to the human. Are there any things that you would recommend that folks do?
I really have 3 North Stars when I consider looking for a new job, and that is timing, research, and off-paper benefits. For timing, even if I were to want a new job today, I am not a risk taker. I'll be totally honest. I've never been a risk taker. It makes me really anxious. The last thing I'm doing in this job market and this economy is taking a risk and jumping to a new job. What's the saying that people always say, last one in, first one out? There was a data point by layoffs.fyi that said this year there's been 60,000 layoffs from more than 250 companies. Right. So the timing right now for me does not make sense. It's too much of a risk. Every time I've made moves in the past, I felt really confident in not only the economy, the market, the company I felt was stable enough, whichever company I was going to. So timing is a really big thing to me.
Are there specific variables that you look at? Inflation rate, unemployment rate, anything in particular?
All of it, but also keep in mind the area that I work in is communications. So I'm focused mostly, a lot of my key stakeholders are journalists. So I'm really paying close attention to the media market, and that's always been really turbulent. So I'm really driven by what's happening in media and what's happening in tech. Okay. And I feel like all 2024, it's been a really rough time. Right. So again, I don't want to leave. For my employers listening, I'm good. I'm staying put. But I would recommend that if it's not a necessity to leave your job right now, I would probably wait a minute. So that's the timing piece. The research piece, you have to do a lot of research when you're looking at a new job. And I don't mean the leadership teams and if they're mostly BIPOC, LGBTQ plus people or women, which Match Groups is, and one of the reasons why I stay, or the mission and values. Those are all obvious things that you should be looking for to make sure there's an alignment. The research I'm paying most attention to is the benefits and the trends that I'm seeing at that company. What's the average tenure of an employer? I've been at my company for 5 years. My manager has been here for almost 2 decades. Her manager has been here for almost a decade. Those are numbers that I pay close attention to.
Do you get all that from LinkedIn, or do you have other resources?
So yes, you can find it on LinkedIn, either by searching employers, but there is a function on LinkedIn, a company page, and some of them do show you the average tenure of people at that company. So LinkedIn has a lot of tools to make this type of research easy for you. If not, you can do it manually, at least looking at the people on your team that you would be joining. And then the benefits piece of that, I also look at family planning benefits. That's really important to me, especially at this stage in my life, and if they're inclusive. So I think if a company is offering support for egg freezing, that's amazing. Is it inclusive? No, that doesn't benefit me in any way, shape, or form. So I'm looking at how inclusive your family planning benefits are. Are you helping with adoption? Are you helping with surrogacy? Are you helping people with different whatever their family happens to look like? So that's a really important piece for me too.
You get that from the company website, LinkedIn, and are you also using HRC for information?
Yes. I actually used to be on the board of the Human Rights Campaign, so I volunteer with that group for over 5 years. So there's a ton of incredible resources from that group. Also, I have in the past interviewed for companies that are pretty upfront with their benefits and have sent PDFs of all that information prior to even interview starting. So that's been really helpful for me to say, okay, this doesn't really match what I'm looking for, or you have everything I'm looking for.
Right.
And then the last piece for me are those off-paper benefits. And for me, what that looks like is being at a company that supports my side hustles that bring in additional revenue.
Oh, so what's that?
For me, that's teaching. So that's really important to me when I'm looking for a new job, whenever that comes. That's going to be part of the conversation is, will you allow me to have that time outside of the typical 9 to 5 that I'm supposed to be online?
Where did you get that idea from? Did that just come to you, or did somebody present that idea to you?
To teach?
Yeah, no, to find a side hustle and then make sure that your current employer was okay with you pursuing that side hustle.
It kind of happened organically. So teaching actually came up from a crippling fear of public speaking, ironically enough. Years and years ago, I realized that I was just in a field where I'm going to be talking to people. Case in point, us here today. And I used to get so nervous that I couldn't even say my name in a conference room. Like my throat would close up. And I remember I was working at Reuter Finn at the time, and I went to HR and I said that I have to get over this and I need help. Can I give presentations to the interns? And I started to do that. And then the HR person at that firm brought me to do a presentation with her at Fordham University.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, wait a minute, I should pitch myself to universities all across New York as a guest speaker. And I started to do that, and then I wound up teaching.
So that was the first portion of our interview with Michael.
Yeah, I loved how Michael shared his strategy for increasing his pay by bouncing around, similarly to kind of how I did.
Exactly.
And his 3-part strategy was picking the right time, 2, doing your research, and 3, negotiating off-paper benefits.
I think it's important to remember, though, that when it comes to timing is industry specific. You may be an industry that's doing really well right now, but that can change quickly. I mean, we see what's going on right now, say, for example, with construction, and they're hiring a lot right now, whereas tech, they've been laying people off. So it really depends, and both of those can change at any time.
At any time. So we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. We have more of our interview with Michael Kaye that we'd like to share with you.
One of the things I really appreciate about this next portion that Michael shares with us is that his company is doing the research. OkCupid has found that individuals who say that they're budgeting are also individuals that appear to be going on more dates through the app. which maybe suggests that individuals who are budgeting have a higher level of confidence, maybe in themselves and their financial situation.
Which is always sexy, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So let's hear more about how Michael is bringing sexy back.
Speaking of being nervous about speaking, one of the things I think a lot of folks are nervous about is actually speaking to their partner about money. But it seems like you are having that conversation with your fiance. You're having those kind of financial conversations now. What triggered that? How did you start to have those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, so I think conversation about money can be awkward and uncomfortable
Right.
because I think a lot of us were raised by parents who said that's not table talk. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about politics. There's all these off limits conversations, and money just happened to be one of them. But I think we're becoming more and more comfortable. And to your point, my partner and I are talking about it way more today than we were when we first started dating. We met a decade ago. I had just graduated college. He was going into his senior year of college. I didn't even have a job at that point. I didn't even have a place to live. There was no money to talk about. So what?
That's true.
Non-existent. Yeah. But flash forward 10 years, now we're in our early 30s. We recently got engaged. We're getting married next year. And conversations about money are not only unavoidable, but they're absolutely necessary. We have to be on the same page about our spending, our saving, our investing. We have to be on the same page of what we're spending for a wedding and what family planning is going to look like and what options make more sense to us. Obviously, adoption is more affordable than surrogacy. So money is kind of embedded in a lot of the conversations that we're having.
What does that look like exactly? Are you having like monthly money dates? Are you using spreadsheets? Do you have favorite budgeting apps? Like how does that look?
Well, I am a PR person and I'm a Capricorn, so I love a spreadsheet. Our wedding spreadsheet was created 48 hours after I proposed. So,
Oh my God, really?
Yes.
Were you more excited about that than the ring?
Oh, it's tough. It's a little bit of a tie. So I do love a spreadsheet. I use it mainly now for wedding planning because it is the largest thing that we're spending on. So that's where a spreadsheet has come in. The way I built it was having a lot of conversations with couples who have been married in the same state that I'm getting married in within the last 3 years, knowing that prices change every single year. That in combination with a lot of research helped me build out a budget and what I should be spending versus what the actuals are. So that's where a spreadsheet is coming in handy for us. And then the other conversations that we're having around money is around our monthly bill. So what rent looks like and all those additional expenses and what's worked for us is splitting those in ways that align with each of our salaries. Because I don't think it really makes sense. Unless you're making the same salary, 50-50 doesn't work for a lot of people.
Right. Apparently, OkCupid has done some studies on finance and how their users are using budgeting tools and whatnot. Can you elaborate on some of those findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really data-driven at OkCupid. We match people on what matters to them through in-app questions. So that's where a lot of our data comes from. It comes from the responses that our users are giving us. And what we started to see in 2024 is that financial stability and security is a really big deal breaker and turn on for people in this era of looking for a man in finance. Well, now they want to talk about it too. So on our app, what's interesting is that daters who are budgeting are getting 25% more matches and having 16% more conversations than people who aren't. And that's telling us that people are becoming a little bit more comfortable having these conversations. And that's really how we think about the questions that we add. We think about all the conversations that are a little bit awkward and uncomfortable for people. And then we ask them on our app because it helps facilitate this conversation and ease them into it a little bit.
Right.
So that's been a big conversation starter currently on OkCupid at least. And we're seeing very similar data from the League, which is another app in our portfolio. And what we're seeing that's pretty interesting is that 6 in 10 daters on the League actually want to sign a prenup before getting married.
6 in 10.
6 in 10. So not only are people being really responsible with their finances, they're being really protective too.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, you said OkCupid's data also is finding that everything becomes more expensive. Daters are choosing cheaper dating options. Can you elaborate on that? And do you have some tips for people who are looking for cheaper dating options that they might not have otherwise considered?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, or this trend is a combination of what's happening with the economy and also how people are looking at their own lifestyle. People, especially driven by Gen Z, are more sober. They're more interested in alcohol-free options. That also happens to be significantly less expensive than dinner and drinks or just drinks alone. At least in Manhattan, I almost have a heart attack every time we go for a drink.
Right.
So people are opting for less expensive dates. And I think some recommendations for anyone who's going on, regardless of how you're meeting. A couple of options are coffee. A lot of people love coffee. It's actually the most popular date on OkCupid.
Really?
But it's a lot less expensive than your typical drink date. You're only having one coffee normally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're me, I'm running
You're
circles
buzzed.
around it. Yeah.
Right, a different kind of buzz, right?
Seriously, stick with one cup, people. So coffee is one that I always recommend. I also again, I live in Manhattan, so a walk in Central Park. What I love about that is it's super casual. You do not have to dress up. And honestly, if the date is not going super well, you have an easy out.
You can hide easily.
So many exit points in that park. So a lot of outdoor activities. If you want to go to the movies, that's less expensive. We normally recommend that for a later date since there's not a lot of communication that can happen.
Yeah.
Although ironically, my first date with my fiance was dinner and a movie. So maybe it does work. But those are some of the dates that we're seeing people opt for versus dinner and drinks. We've actually seen that kind of decline over the years as a date that people gravitate towards.
It almost seems like this trend of loud budgeting, which is telling people, hey, I don't want to, I either don't want to spend that money or I can't spend the money right now, is working its way into the dating circles. And I think that's a great thing because it actually does broach the financial topic pretty early. And it's a great way to broach the financial topic because you can say, I don't want to spend the money because I'm saving or I'm working towards this financial goal. Because that is the easy way to start the financial conversation with a prospective mate.
I also think that's filtering into friendship circles as well.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I'm seeing amongst my friends, especially when it comes to weddings. There's so much money that are being spent on the celebrations. I have definitely opted out of bachelor parties, and I've been transparent. I just couldn't afford it at that moment in my life. And even now, there's never a bachelor party where every single person is present because people have different priorities.
Right.
We're planning ours right now. One of my best friends can't make it. They're planning a wedding, so they're spending a lot of money. So I think beyond dating, a lot of us are just more open about these conversations around money, which
More
is
honesty.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing.
It is.
Totally.
It's very good, especially for those of us in the personal finance space. We kind of feel like, okay, people are finally catching up to what we've been talking about for so long.
You're the trendsetters.
Oh, thank you.
I wouldn't go there, but yes, I would. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think you've shared a great way for our listeners and viewers to be able to increase their salaries, but also to help maintain some of their ongoing costs that we all deal with on a regular basis or once in a lifetime when we get married. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Well, that concludes our interview with Michael. I really love how he found a way to increase his income streams while also overcoming his fear of public speaking by becoming an adjunct professor at colleges around here in New York City.
Absolutely. So what is our living not so fabulously takeaway from this episode? I think it probably is make sure you have a strategy. You employ some sort of strategy to increase your income. Don't leave it up to chance.
And maybe use Michael's strategy as a suggestion.
Yeah, his three-pronged approach.
I would also suggest, Michael talked about the importance of budgeting. And a recent study came out from the CFP board that found that folks who budget tend to be more confident, more secure, and more in control of their finances and their life.
Yeah, which kind of ties into this whole trend of loud budgeting that's going on right now. People feeling really comfortable telling their friends, no, I don't want to spend my money on that right now because I have it set aside for something else, or I'm working towards this financial goal. That is a really good thing that we're seeing people having those kinds of conversations now.
So being loud is good sometimes?
Oh, I guess so.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. Until next time,
Stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.